Welcome to episode 1 of the Hit Your Target podcast. I'm your host, Laura, and today I am thrilled to be joined by Tre Lowe, broadcaster, keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and you may have seen him as a finalist on the BBC show The Apprentice. Tre is also the co-founder of Sobo Club, which is a members-only networking club for entrepreneurs, and one half of the acclaimed band Architects. Tre's music has resonated with millions, featured prominently in national advertising campaigns, and he's also remixed with the likes of Usher, Justin Timberlake, Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston, to name a few. It's fair to say Tre is a remarkable person with a journey that's as inspiring as it is unique. In our conversation, Tre opens up about his incredible path, from battling severe health challenges to transforming adversity into a powerful source of strength. In this episode, we explore Tre's passion for creating documentaries that raise awareness on mental health and men's issues. He also shares the impact of his father's journey from poverty in Nigeria to moving to the UK, which shaped his perspective on resilience, race, and the role of mentorship. Tre's philosophy is about using life struggles as fuel for personal growth, and he's dedicated to helping others do the same through his work and the founding of the Sobo Club. This episode is packed with insights to empower you to embrace challenges and unlock your potential. So if you're ready to be inspired, tune in. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate and share it with others who need a dose of motivation today. Hi, Tre. Thank you so much for joining me today. I just want to talk to you about, in the spirit of Hit Your Target, some goals that you've actually achieved over your life. And when I look at your backstory, for anybody that knows you, you're a successful artist, you've been a mentor and an inspirational entrepreneur through your journey on The Apprentice. But I know that you've had some challenges that you've had to overcome as well, not least from your health implications and developing tinnitus when you were young. So what would you say is the biggest goal that you've achieved that's developed you as a person?
Surviving, I would say. There was a time when, like you said, with my health and stuff like that, there was a time that I thought, I'm not going to be able to survive this. You know, I had tinnitus, I had derealization, I had massive head pressure that felt like a brain tumor. I was achieving some great things in my life, but I remember thinking, this is going to get so bad that I'm going to have to jump off a building somewhere, which is very different from people who actually want to end their life. It was just more of a pragmatic sense of, do you know what? It's not worth living with this level of suffering. If it gets bad, I'm off. You know, it's a very pragmatic thing. So I think my biggest achievement really is navigating my way through those challenges, not only to the point where I survived, I actually thrived as a result of these challenges, because sometimes people don't want things to happen to them, but life doesn't work like that. You know, you don't get to choose cancer. It just happens. You don't get to choose heart disease. It happens. And you don't get to choose, like I found, age 15, being given an overdose of a drug in what should have been a safe place, which was the hospital, following a very routine appendicectomy. You know, I should have been plain sailing. Everyone has their appendix taken out, you know, thousands, tens of thousands of people, except I was given an overdose of a drug, which caused the reaction, which led me to have all of these health conditions. But I didn't choose it. It chose me. And I think the reason why it was my biggest success really is because I learned to see it as a gift rather than a curse. And it's definitely been my biggest triumph to be able to see that as a gift, because some people get even half of that and the rest of their life is spent as a victim, essentially, of something that is not personal. You know, whereas other people get given these things and they use it and flip it, and they use it as a source of strength, which is what I've done, because otherwise I wouldn't be the person I am today. And I think the person I am today is so resilient that it really doesn't matter what life throws at me. In fact, the more you throw at me, the stronger I become. I actually don't like it when I don't have challenges now. I almost feel like I can't function if things are too easy. I'll just be lazy and I can't be bothered. I actually need, you can't do it. You're not good enough. You don't have what it takes. I need all of that. You know, I need people coming for me. I need my health coming for me. I need life to come for me. I need that fire that it kind of builds in you if you are that way inclined, that then says, okay, I'll show you. So it's resilience, you know. And I think the thing that icing on the cake for me is not just resilience for myself. It's the reason why I founded Sobo Club and why I know you, is because I don't believe it's just something for me. I think the lesson that I was given age 15 was, in some way, you're going to be a leader for others, and you're going to show people that no matter what life throws at them, they can excel. So yeah, easily my biggest triumph. Before I even start talking about like plaques on the wall or getting to the final of The Apprentice, those things are nice. They're okay. But I think, being able to really essentially cheat death and give the knowledge what you've learned to others, easily my biggest strength.
I love that. And I love what you've created with Sobo Club as well, because, that environment of getting people to understand that when one achieves, everybody else achieves, and the community spirit within that is just amazing. And I want to kind of touch back, because what I read about you was that you'd actually referred to pain juice. So around when you set up as a music producer with your brother Ashley, and that Body Groove came out of that pain and that resilience. And so I'm intrigued as to, take me back to that time. What was it that started that resilience, do you think?
So it's the same thing, it was, in fact, I'd probably say it was older than me being paralyzed age 15. What started the resilience really was my own father's story. So just to go back a bit, I'm first generation Nigerian immigrant. Essentially, my dad came here to the UK in 1961 and found himself in one of the worst neighbourhoods in London at the time, a neighbourhood called Notting Hill, which is where I am right now. And, his journey was marked by utter resilience because there was no choice. If we think life is tough here in the UK, you can't even compare it to rural 1950s or 90s, essentially, Nigeria. It's another world. So he was the product of such poverty that he lost 7 siblings, I believe. And he only survived that because he was taken from his village to a neighbouring village. When I say neighbouring, it was probably about 20 miles. And his uncle carried him on his shoulders barefoot, essentially. So, if you look at, that type of experience, my dad barely surviving absolute poverty. God knows what was killing him, probably something like dysentery or some other sort of poor illness that in the West we would cure like that. But in, 1930s Nigeria, you're going to die, And my dad always had the dream, he grew up in a neighbouring village. He didn't have his family with him anyway. All his siblings were gone. His mum and dad was still in the village. They couldn't afford to leave their farm. And he just had a dream. And my dad's dream was a very simple dream. It was to come to the UK, because that was the motherland for Nigerians, it being a British colony, and be rich. And for him, being rich was an escape from death, essentially. And that's what forms when life is hard. You start to look for solutions to ensure that you never have to deal with that again, And he always tells me a story, which I call the white man's plane, because he would say when he was in school in Nigeria and a plane would go overhead, the whole school would come out, and it was a big occasion because, in 1930s, he was born in 37, so 30s, 40s, planes going overhead in rural Nigeria was not something you'd see. Normally, the whole school would come out and he would point at the sky as his little boy, orphan essentially, to them, and say, one day I'm going to be on the white man's plane, I'm going to go to London and I'm going to be rich. Now, of course, if you're saying that, and these kids are looking at my dad, dressed in rags, he's living with extended families. He's pretty much it's like indentured servitude, what he had to deal with. Yeah, they went and rescued him, but what they needed was another male to go out and farm. They didn't even want him going to school in the first place. So when he would say it, it sounded absurd to the other kids and to the teachers. So what they would do, because they couldn't be with the absurdity of his dreams and ambitions, they would beat him. So my dad used to get beaten for saying that, for daring to dream. How dare you? Who do you think you are? Small boy. You don't have a mother. You don't have a father. Who do you think you are? Because they felt belittled by the fact that he would dare to have these dreams and dare to say it out loud. And my dad took those beatings, used it as fuel, pain juice, that fuel, and essentially made it from that school. He went to, I believe, college in Lagos. From Lagos, he came to the UK, ended up in Notting Hill because it was a neighbourhood that a lot of immigrants were living in. Absolute squalor. He ended up in the house that I'm in now, which didn't look nothing like it did then. And he was in one room, with my mum, living in one tiny room full of immigrants, from Irish immigrants, to West Indian immigrants, to African immigrants, just full of immigrants. And he would be the one to collect rent essentially for everyone, because the landlord's agent trusted my dad because he had this fire, this belief in him. And he always tells this story of he used to always clean, because even though, it was horrific, the house, he took pride in cleaning the communal areas. And when he used to clean, he used to notice this guy would come in, essentially showing people around. He didn't even know what was going on. But the guy would see him cleaning, sort of step over him and show these people around. So my dad figured out he was someone important, but didn't know who he was. So it kept happening. And on the last occasion it happened, this guy said to him, "Why are you cleaning? Every time we come here, you're always cleaning." So my dad was a bit fiery. Obviously, you can imagine his background, right? A bit of chip on his shoulder, a bit of a short one, right? Short man syndrome. He was sort of ready to fight because, he was such a fighter, but he was like, no, he just sensed this was the time for him to sort of hone that in, because he felt, how dare you talk about me cleaning? And he said, I just like to look after the place where I live. So the guy said to him, you don't know me, but I'll introduce myself to you. I'm actually your landlord. And for the past couple of months, I've been trying to sell this place. I've not been able to sell it. And I really like what you do. I like the fact that, you've been a person looking after this house. I want to sell this house to you. Now, of course, my dad couldn't afford it. As horrific as Notting Hill was, it was still out of reach of an immigrant like my dad, who was on a couple of shillings a week or whatever he was earning at the time. But the guy said to him, I'm going to help you, because of that. The guy himself was a Jewish guy, and he himself was an immigrant only a couple of decades before. Notting Hill was quite heavily Jewish at the time when it started to get immigrant. So he recognized in my dad someone who had the ambition, but not necessarily the means. So I think he said something to my dad like, don't worry, I'll say that you've been working for me at our estate agent's office. We'll make sure that your wages are enough for you to be able to buy this place. And then he bought the place, which I believe was £12,000, which adjusted for inflation was about 100k. I've done this before. And it's now about a £4.5 million property, because Notting Hill went from being a horrific ghetto to one of the most desired neighbourhoods in Europe, I'd almost say, but certainly in the UK. So when you grow up in a household like that, and we're Nigerians and Igbo Nigerians, and our culture is very much about hard work. Like, we grew up in an era, my dad always said to me, because you're black, you're going to have to work 3-4 times harder, which is what I did. And I quite like that. I know some people don't like that type of message, like it should just be equal. Why do we have to work harder because we're black? I quite like that. I think it gave me an advantage knowing I had to work harder to achieve the same or more results than my white counterparts. I love that message, and I still use it today when I coach and mentor people. Outwork everyone else. Don't worry that it's not fair because you're black or you're a woman or you're neurodivergent or whatever might be going on for you, whatever handicap you feel you might have, and we all have a handicap. Work harder than your competitors, because if you can work harder than them, if you can take all the bad things that's happened to you, which I call pain juice, and use it as fuel, and if you can have something about you in terms of your purpose that's beyond you, beyond your ego, it can't just be, I want to have a Ferrari and I want to be rich. It's got to be, I want to serve others, or something bigger than you, that if you died, what you did would reverberate through time. If you can have those things together, no one's going to outdo you. So yeah, that for me was pain juice. It was using my dad's story and the pain he went through, then with my own pain and suffering as fuel. No bitterness, no poor me, just raw, unadulterated fuel, what I call pain juice. And you'll notice that in society, people that go through the most pain tend to be the most powerful. And some of the people I admire most, whether it's like Oprah and her journey, being molested as a kid, age 13, coming to Chicago as this slightly overweight black woman coming into what was a white broadcasting space. She used all of that as fuel. 50 Cent is another one for me, another hero of mine, shot 9 times. Get rich or die trying. Now look at him. He's transitioned his career from a musician to, again, a media mogul. Another one of my biggest heroes, Beethoven. I'd almost argue he's one of the biggest reasons why I didn't jump off a building, because Beethoven, like me, was a musician with tinnitus, except he had tinnitus, in the 18th century, I believe it was. Don't quote my maths. 18th, 19th century Vienna. And he recognized that his art was bigger than him, and he got through tinnitus, hearing loss. We believe he had syphilis and all sorts of ailments, which at the time were horrific. And according to his diaries, he was quite a miserable man. But he used all of that as fuel because he knew his art was bigger than him. And here I was, 180 years after his life, the son of a Nigerian immigrant, listening to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, especially Ode to Joy, that rousing, beautiful piece of music. And through some of my hardest time, his music kept me going. So you've got to use what life throws at you as juice. You've got to use it as juice to fuel you. And if you really want to succeed, make your life bigger than yours. And you see it with a lot of these billionaires. People think it's all about money, but if it was about money, billionaires would have given up. I mean, Elon Musk would have stopped. Zuckerberg would have stopped. So there's something else driving them. And I know for Elon Musk, he's someone that wants to put man on Mars. I mean, if you're going to have a big purpose and you want to move humanity forward, my God, it doesn't get bigger than putting man on Mars, does it? And that's what fuels him. And what fuels me is making a difference. And I know I'm not going to be able to achieve what I want in my lifetime. Even if I had 10 lifetimes, I couldn't achieve it. I would never be able to achieve, the point where people look at what's happening to them as fuel. But it is still my mission that people use it as fuel and people get to be the best version of themselves in the time that they've got, because life is so short.
Yeah, but you've summed up a lot of my questions in there, because from talking to you and getting to know you, your sense of identity and your purpose always comes through as the strongest thing that you talk about. And I think that's so pivotal, I would say, in what's driven you. And listening to you talking about your dad and your kind of, the principles that have guided you and the values that you've had, you even mentioned in there about that, it's difficult because you're Black, and that can be sometimes a limiting belief, and, how you've overcome that, which,
it's not difficult
it
for me. It's more a case of I understand how some people think their perceived handicap can actually be a handicap. But I actually say flip it. So I've never grown up with this sense that life is harder because I'm Black. I think life is easier because I'm Black.
Yeah.
I think there is something about being a minority that gives you advantages that others don't have. For instance, I can use my perceived weaknesses in my favor. So it might be a sense of, being a Black male, especially I grew up very working class, that I'm going to speak a certain way, or I'm going to have a limit of knowledge or limit of ambition or limit of something. But I use that to my advantage, because then people often either underestimate you or they're so surprised by who you are and who you're being that it elevates you. People will be surprised that I'm very eloquent, very well-spoken, very able. I mean, even being on The Apprentice, people would have thought, if you just literally read everyone's description on that show and read, okay, you've got a dentist, you've got someone in recruitment, you've got this one in business, you've got a guy that has had a pie shop through the generations, and then you've got someone who did Body Groove, made the body move. You'd be thinking, that guy who did Body Groove hasn't got a hope in hell. He's going to be going up against all these people from business or from academia. You'd write me off, right? And he's old. This guy's 48. He's like the oldest person that's ever been on that show. And we know statistically, the older you are on The Apprentice, the less likely you are to do well. It's just a fact, right? So people would have thought, this Tre Lowe, whoever he thinks he is, he's probably a bit up his own proverbial. He's going to be terrible. He's probably going to think he's cool, and he's somehow going to charm Lord Sugar. Lord Sugar's going to see right through him. He's going to be out on his ear. And there I was as a finalist. And by the way, I knew I'd get to the final before it even started, because that's how much faith I have in me. Now, I knew I wasn't able to win because I just didn't have enough time to create a viable business plan where someone like Lord Sugar in his age would think, yeah, go. So I knew that. That was fine. I was okay with that. But the challenge of knowing I had all of those preconceptions against me is exactly the fuel that I used in that show. You were not going to beat me on that show. No one was ever going to beat me on that show because of the amount of pain juice that I had in my favor. So no, I've never seen my color as a handicap. I think it actually gave me such advantages in my life. Even on The Apprentice, people stop me all the time, again, because they're probably thinking, the preconception they would have had about me and the reality of what they saw, someone that was a team player, that was committed, that was resilient, that was able to lift up his teammates, that was always playing as a team, someone that still managed to be charming and charismatic. All of that came out of my own suffering. And that's my advantage. And like I say, I know I can't teach people that, because I do think we live in a world where, understandably so, people's suffering or people's preconceived handicapped, or it's almost encouraged. Yeah, poor you. Yeah, it is harder. Or I sometimes find it a bit patronizing. Oh, because you're Black, you're going to be a certain way. No, that's not true. Some of the smartest, most cleverest people on planet Earth have been Black. I believe that of every bit of my body. I think it's the culture that people adopt, or the beliefs that people have, that stop them achieving. Like, I grew up around some of London's worst nightmares. I mean, these were people that were in and out of jail, a lot of them. Now, I didn't do what they did because I was very lucky. I had a dad that, on paper, we didn't live rich, but on paper was a millionaire. And I didn't look at their heroes in the same way they did. Their heroes were the other local drug dealers. I looked at the other local drug dealers as these guys are wasting their life. They're all going to end up in jail, and the money they're making pales into insignificant compared to what my dad is amassing with property. He's not robbing or stealing or doing anything bad to anyone. He's just really leveraging the opportunities that this country has, because from his point of view, the streets were paved with gold, and they were paved with gold. So my path was, I'm just going to follow my dad. But I still knew these people, and it's sad what happened to them, because they were some of the cleverest, most able people. People just saw them and saw young black boys with their pants hanging down and their hair twisted and not necessarily speaking the Queen's English. But I saw some of the most enterprising, the most charismatic, the most charming, the most innovative people. They just happened to use all of that talent in the wrong space. So half of them ended up dead or in jail. But they weren't stupid, you know, and that's another thing I really like to advocate. I don't really care where anyone's from. I don't really care about your background, your color, your creed, your religion, your sex, your whatever it might be. I think everyone's capable of greatness. Genuinely, that's the thing that most intrigues me about the human spirit, is what greatness can I unlock from them? Because, like I say, statistically, I shouldn't have done well. I shouldn't have, as a poor working class black male, have necessarily done well to the point I'm, you know, in the final of The Apprentice, or, you know, I've sold and streamed over 100 million records, or I've spoken to so many people or impacted so many people. Statistically, that shouldn't have happened, but it's possible for anyone. I'm not special.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that's what really shines through. And certainly, I remember you telling me your story about how you overcome the fear of public speaking from an experience that happened at school. You know, I'm conscious of your time, but, you know, that those things are reframing your beliefs, which is just so powerful. You've fulfilled my goal for this podcast anyway, because I did think, is there a way I can weave in to get you to sing a line of Body Groove? So thanks for that.
I always do that. You know, I went for a long period of my life, especially when I was unwell for so long. So I was unwell from the age of 15, well, to now. I still have these ailments, but when I say unwell, more in the sense that my mindset hadn't transformed. So from 15 to 33, 33 is when it came to a head where I literally had to decide I'm either going to have to jump off a building or not. And I'll share that story, because I know obviously you're aware of my story, but anyone listening may not be aware of it. So medically, what happened to me was, age 15, I was recovering from the appendectomy. I was given a drug, an antiemetic drug called Stemetil, which stops you vomiting. I didn't need it. The nurse asked me, do you want it? To this day, I don't know whether she did it maliciously or whether she just didn't know what she was doing. Who knows? I'll never know, and I don't even hold it against her. But she gave me an overdose of this drug. It caused what is called ocular gyrate crisis. Ocular because it's quite a violent reaction to the drugs. I say paralysis just because it's easier for someone to understand, but it's not. It's actually a spasm. So it's basically like locked-in syndrome. Your eyes roll back in your head, the ocular bit. You're literally looking at the wall behind you, and your body's contorted, so you're trapped in your own body, which for me as a young child was my biggest fear. I was severely claustrophobic as a child. I could not get into a lift or be in confined spaces. And I remember being trapped in my body thinking, I could not live like this. And it's terrifying. And I could hear the doctors saying to, the doctors and nurses saying to my mum and dad, who were there at the time, don't worry, he'll be fine. This is okay. This is normal. And they were right. About half an hour later, my body, it relaxed itself, and I was able to be normal again. And I thought, I don't ever want to experience that, because that's worse than death. And no sooner had I had this thought, I could feel my body going into the same type of sensations. And I was getting locked in again. Now, as a child, I'm thinking, if they've given me the antidote, which is a drug called benzotropin, surely benzotropin is not going to be able to work now, because whatever they've given me, this drug, has clearly damaged some part of me. And I've gone back into this locked-in syndrome. It's even more violent than the first time, because I literally can't move anything but my eyes. By this time, the doctors and the nurses are panicking, because they are thinking it didn't work first time. So I'm thinking, if they're worried, I'm screwed. So they give me another massive dose of this drug, benzotropin, and I come out of this locked-in syndrome. My body relaxes. So you can imagine I'm like this, unable to move. Like, it's horrific.
Wow.
I'd rather be paralyzed, 'cause at least your body just goes limp. Whereas like that, It's a violent way to be trapped in your body. They give me the drug. I finally come out of it, but I was never the same again. And I said to my mum and dad, Mum, Dad, can't you hear this noise? And why does everything look so strange? So even though the effects of the drugs are released, the neurological effects of the drug hadn't done. So I now had tinnitus, and I didn't know any of the names of this stuff. I'm just telling you now in hindsight because I now know the name of the drug because I looked at my medical records about 20 years after the fact. By the time I didn't know what tinnitus was, I certainly didn't know what derealization is. And derealization is a severe form of brain fog, very, very severe. In fact, I do want to do a documentary about brain fog because it's quite a common ailment. I really want to talk about it. It's one of the scariest things you can experience. So I had brain fog, and then one of the worst symptoms I had was a sensation which over the years became the one that made me want to jump off the building, and that was a head pressure that became a head vice. It was like my head was locked in a vice. So from age 15, I was in and out of hospital, saw every single expert you can imagine. All my symptoms were all getting worse progressively, no matter what I did. It got to the point where I kind of just said to my mum and dad, there's no point even going to doctors anymore, because when my mum and dad weren't in earshot, the doctor would say to me, have you been taking drugs? Which is, I guess, one of the downsides, the stereotypical downsides, right? If you'll keep complaining. And I was quite aware of sort of black men getting institutionalized, especially back then for things like schizophrenia. So I thought it's maybe not that safe for me to talk about it anymore because they've done every test and they couldn't find everything. You know, I did every MRI scan, every CT scan, every drug. I did everything you can imagine, and nothing happens at that point. I just thought, it's this person making it up. And I just thought, okay, stop talking about it because, yeah, you might get in trouble for it. And I had to carry on with life. You know, as you can imagine, it's got a huge effect on you. Just having tinnitus would affect you, especially as a music lover. And I didn't know music was making it worse anyway. Then having this dream sensation and the head sensation. I mean, growing up as a kid, you're 15 years old, you're at your most vulnerable time because you're learning to sort of be a man and all of the, you know, difficulties, you know, going from kid to an adult, essentially. I still had my dreams. My biggest dream was to be on Top of the Pops. I had that since I was a child, for some reason. Growing up Nigerian in Notting Hill, which is a very vibrant, creative area, I always wanted to be in the arts, in music. So, you know, I had this dream of being a pop star and being on Top of the Pops, which by age 23, we'd released music, which was massive, underground. 2 years later, we released Body Groove, which was massive, overground. You know, ended up on Top of the Pops, had all of that success, you know, on stages with like the Spice Girl, Tom Jones, Robbie Williams, people like that. And all the time I was dealing with these health conditions. So it was like the best of times and the worst of times, because one day I was on Top of the Pops, the next day I was getting my 10th MRI brain scan, inevitably to be told by a happy-looking neurologist that there was nothing wrong. And of course he's happy because he's thinking good news. I'm thinking, no, bad news. Tell me I've got a bloody brain tumour. Because if you tell me I've got a brain tumour, at least it's something I can do. Because if you keep saying there's nothing wrong, but I feel as far away from right as you could possibly feel. Like, so my mindset was horrific. My mental health was shot to pieces, you know. So fast forward from 15 to 33, which was 2008. I DJ'd in this club called Sugar Hut in Fulham. They had these massive speakers. I woke up the next day after DJing in this club with severe tinnitus. My tinnitus, which was probably a 8 out of 10 in terms of severity, now became a 20 out of 10. My head pressure by this point was so unbearable. I have to be honest, I'd started to not look at my future. I wasn't thinking I'd make it beyond 30s by that point, regardless of this incident. But what this incident did is it fast forwarded the amount of time I had left before I had to really consider killing myself, essentially, just out of sheer frustration. So I remember waking up that day, totally deaf, thinking, I can't cope with this. Not only is my tinnitus 10 times worse because I DJ'd last night stupidly, but I'm now deaf, so I can't even escape the tinnitus. And the thing about tinnitus, it's got nothing to do with your hearing. You know, you could be totally deaf and have tinnitus for the rest of your life. And I was there crying my eyes out thinking, I actually don't want to end my life because I'm not suicidal. I actually love life. There is so much I want to give, but at the same time, I can't live like this because there's no life living like this. And it's the same reason why people go to Dignitas. I completely understand why people go to Dignitas, because they have something that is incurable and their quality of life is so bad, they just think life is not worth it anymore. My quality of life was so bad, it wasn't worth living. It literally wasn't worth
Wow.
living. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy ever. There's no one I dislike on planet Earth that I would hand to them what I had to deal with, age 33. Anyway, I was like, okay, I was a big believer in God, big believer in faith. I was like, there must be a reason why I'm going through this. There has to be. I can't believe that I've got some sort of condition that is unknown to medical science and nobody can give me answers. And because I was such a nerd, again, being Nigerian Igbo, education is literally beaten into us. I have such a love of learning and knowledge. I was like, I'm going to put these skills to good use. I'm going to spend at least a day, maybe 2 days before I then maybe have to top myself. But in these 2 days, I'm going to do whatever I can to find answers. Now, luckily, by then, the internet had evolved. 2008 versus 1990 when it first happened to me. There was no internet really at that time. So I was like, I'm going to stay online till I get answers. And I was online, Googling everything, like ringing in the ears. I knew that was tinnitus, fine. But that wasn't my main issue. My main issue was the head pressure and a dreamlike feeling. So I was Googling, I feel like I'm in a dream. I feel like I'm trapped behind a pane of glass. I can't connect to the world. I feel like I'm going mad. And then I had this blog pop up by a woman called Starchild or Stargazer. And it was just a blog. And she was describing her day-to-day life and saying, my life feels like a dream. It feels like I'm stuck behind a pane of glass. But the one advantage she had over me was she had a bloody name. And the name that she had was derealization, depersonalization disorder. And I was like, oh my God, I had something to Google. So I've Googled this term, derealization, depersonalization disorder, to the point I became an expert on the thing. And what I worked out was age 15, when I was given this drug and I was paralyzed, what the brain does when you're in extreme trauma is it tries to shield you from the trauma. In the same way, if you cut yourself, you'll have growth that will go over it. That's hard and crusty, which is fine when it's outside the body. But when it does it inside your body, if you've got a lot of plaque buildup in your arteries, that's not a good thing when your body tries to repair that stuff. And that's what happened to me. What my brain tried to do to protect me actually caused this suffering that I would endure. Because what my brain did was put me in a safe place. It's a bit like when someone says they've been attacked or assaulted and it felt like they've been watching themselves, like out-of-body experience. My brain took me out of my body, but then put me back once the danger had gone. Because it happened to me twice, I was like, I'm not going back in that body because I could get paralyzed again. And my biggest fear is being locked in close places. So it became, my brain kept me disassociated, because derealization and depersonalization is a disassociation disorder. You disassociate from your own self, right? So because I disassociated and I didn't know what was happening, nobody told me what it was, that disassociation became the new threat and it became this vicious circle. I became more and more disassociated from reality. I became more and more derealized, more and more extreme brain fog. And the tension in the back of the head was the same thing. It's just tension. It's like being tense because you're waiting that fight or flight response. So I learned all about the amygdala, all about the limbic system, all about the brain, all about physiology, all about the way we deal with trauma, everything. And I put it all to one. And I thought what I'm dealing with was an anxiety disorder, an extreme anxiety disorder. And if it is an anxiety disorder, what I need to do is dial down my amygdala, which is, your typical ways, as you would know, is, you're deep breathing, you're being in touch with oneself, everything you can to really calm down that fight or flight response. And within about 2 weeks, the head pressure disappeared. And let me tell you, I tried every drug, every treatment. I mean, there was a time we were on TV. I think it was Channel 4. I can't remember what it was, one of the Body Group interviews. And I was like trying to sit in a certain way because one side of my face had been eaten up by one of the strongest muscle relaxant drugs you can ever be prescribed. Because by then I was saying to doctors, just give me something. And they were so desperate that they were just letting me take trial drugs. It eaten up my skin. And I remember just thinking the extreme with what I had to go to try and deal with these symptoms. And if I'd known all these years ago that it was anxiety, my own brain, my mind was conjuring up the very fear that I was trying to escape from. It's crazy. It was a eureka moment, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, there's a part of me that thought, what a waste. How many years have I been here? Such a waste. Anyway, I ended up seeing this eminent professor in a hospital in, I'm trying to remember, it was Southeast London somewhere. And I described to him what my findings were. Bear in mind, I'm not a bloody professor. But he listened to me and he was like, you've got it absolutely spot on. And he couldn't believe that I knew it, even using some of the medical terms. And it was just because I was so frustrated from years of seeing doctors, none of which could tell me stuff. I had to become an expert myself. But what was great about that is I then became really invested in mindset. See what I mean about pain juice? Your biggest suffering can become your biggest triumph. So yeah, that the experience itself has made me so sure, and I could be wrong, but so sure that we have the tools to transcend our lives and be the best version of ourselves purely by transforming our mindset, the way we react to things, the way we look at things, the way we deal with fear. Like most people, the reason why they don't maximize who they are is because of fear. What do other people going to think? If I post that, if I do this, if I do that podcast, if I go on a show like The Apprentice, I'm out in the first week, or if I don't win, it's all fear, isn't it? FEAR, false evidence appearing real. Just what happened to me, it was all fake. My brain was conjuring up this world, and that's why I suffered. But it wasn't real. It didn't really matter. So here I am, the product of suffering, both my father and both myself, and it's made me more powerful than ever.
Yeah, I mean, there is so much gold in what you've just said in that last 5 minutes. It kind of encapsulates all we talk about around mindset, because if we can overcome those things, what else could we do? And I want to ask you, what is your next big target, Tre? What are you applying from what you've learned from these past successes? What are you going for next?
So what I'm going for next is a couple of things I'm really excited about. Definitely Sobo Club. If anyone doesn't know what Sobo Club is, I know it's back to front, but it's SOBO. It stands for Social Bohemia. Sobo Club came out of the Apprentice viewing parties. When I used to watch Apprentice, I used to bring everyone that wanted to come and watch it with me to come and watch it with me. And it wasn't just about watching me on TV. It was about let's collaborate, because I've always been in the business of collaborating and bringing people together and having people present to their greatness. Like that is my purpose, that people get present to their greatness now. So everything I do is a reflection of that purpose. So Sobo Club is a social networking club where we bring people together, people who are entrepreneurs, business owners, creatives, so that they can have the environment and the tools to be the best version of themselves. So that's one thing that I'm excited about. The other thing I'm excited about when I spoke about sharing about brain fog is creating documentaries. I just did one for the BBC on BBC Morning Live, and that was looking at creating a new life after the age of 50. So I'm going to be 50 in 2 months' time. And it's looking at the concept
Hard to believe, Tre. Really hard to believe.
I know, like certainly don't crack, but I'm very much my age, and I love it because with age comes wisdom. And it's really about dealing with a few things, right? So one thing I'm passionate about is men. And by that, I think men are in a very vulnerable state. I lost my own brother to COVID, which is part of the reason why I ended up on The Apprentice. Because after his death, I looked at life very different. I was no longer this person that was concerned with what people think, and I was more concerned with absolutely maximizing myself. Because prior to his death, there was an element of me that was still a bit of a musician, still a bit cool, and all the rest of it. And when he died, I was like, God, he died at 49. I'm going to be 49. I don't want to have one of these lives of regret. So any opportunity that comes my way, I want to do documentaries that highlight some of the things that we're talking about. And the reason why I mentioned men as well, my brother, was a lot of the ailments and a lot of men are dying early. One way they're dying is, suicide, as we know. Suicide is the biggest killer of men under 35. And it comes back to a mindset. In my opinion, women are a lot more resilient mentally than men are. And because men are not as mentally resilient, men tend to end their lives more. Just like I was in that space where I had to contemplate ending my life, a lot of men are not doing what I'm doing. They are literally just saying, no, I'm checking out. Whatever is going on, they're checking out. And I always see suicide as a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Now, I know I spoke about dignitas before. I think dignitas is slightly different. It's much more of a pragmatic, having explored every other possibility, choice to end your life. And I know for some people it's controversial, but it's slightly different. Whereas for a lot of people, suicide, where it comes from a more of a mental health type disorder, whether it's anxiety, depression, whatever it might be, I think in most cases they can be averted. I think people don't have the support they need. So the reason why I want to create these series of documentaries, some of which are aimed at men, is I do want people to understand just how much power they have over their mindset. A lot of the suffering that we go through in life isn't what's happening. is what we make mean what's happening. So I noticed with me how I cured myself. It was, finding out exactly what was going on with me, but it was also transforming the meaning I was given to it. So even though I learned what I learned in 2008 and I had these discoveries, I went for about a 5 to 8 year battle with tinnitus after that. Because bear in mind, I went deaf and my hearing did come back after a couple of days, but my tinnitus unfortunately didn't go back. The only symptom that disappeared was head pressure. The derealization was still there, but because I knew what it was, the fear that was around it dissipated, and I just accepted I'm never going to be able to see. I'm likely for the rest of my life never going to see the world as is. I'm probably always going to see the world for this foggy space, and I've made peace with that. But the tinnitus was a different story. I was a musician, a DJ, and tinnitus threatened my very livelihood. And for years, I stubbornly held on to DJing. It made me money. B, it gave me so much joy. I can't think of a more joyful occupation than playing music and watching people dance and playing music that you love. And the fight I had with tinnitus was nuts. It was insane. I still, in the back of my mind, contemplated jumping off the building because of tinnitus. It was a really hard battle. So the reason why I want to do documentaries around mindset, around health, and all the rest of it is I was actually fortunate. There are a lot of people who are not as fortunate as me, perhaps maybe don't learn that level of resilience, are not able to find joy in their suffering or create concept like pain juice. They have no aspirations to be mentors or coaches. Therefore, their suffering has no meaning. They just want to get on with life and be a plumber or a banker or whatever it might be. And they'd rather run away from their ailments than deal with it. And they're in an environment in the world where the world does kind of encourage people's pity parties. And it might sound hard that I'm saying that. And I don't want anyone that listens to this podcast to think that I don't care or I'm sort of insensitive. I get your suffering. I understand it. But when you create a pity party around your suffering, all you do is perpetuate your suffering, because it's literally like throwing a party. You're inviting a DJ and you've got drinks, you've got your friends, and you're all celebrating the very thing that you say you don't want, which is to suffer. And with that, there's an acceptance of you do have this condition, or you have got that, or you have got this. And the first step to curing yourself is acceptance. And by curing, I don't mean that the ailment's going to disappear. It won't do. You might have to live with it like I do for the rest of your life. You haven't got choice over that. But you do have choice over the mindset of what you make it mean, and therefore how much it causes you pain. Because you can give two people the same thing. I always use the analogy of, imagine two people going into war. Both of them get their legs blown up by an IED or something. They're in Helmand's province or something in Afghanistan. They both get blown up. One goes on to be a motivational speaker who impacts the lives of millions. The other one goes into a spiral of drink, loses his wife, loses his kids, and ends up on the street and maybe ends up killing himself. The exact same thing happened to both people, the exact same ailment. But one transformed the meaning and used it to make a difference, and the other one couldn't do. So I do want to talk about what are quite challenging, difficult subjects that are quite triggering, but I think the world needs to hear it. So that's two of the things I'm really excited about. Sobo Club and creating documentaries and content around people being powerful with whatever life throws at them.
Yeah, and you have just given so much, like I say, so much gold in that. And I wrote a post about how you called me selfish. That's the most empowering thing you could have done.
You see, I just had a disclaimer about, I know it might trigger people. I am a little bit triggering, and I know when I coach and mentor people, like me saying to you, you're selfish. I'm just not one to sugarcoat stuff. But what was it like for you when I said that, and what did you discover as a result of that?
Yeah, but 100%. And that's what I think, I very much of that same mindset that, you need to have that tough love, because it's really easy to sit back and have that imposter syndrome. And, as I said to you, I fear, putting myself out there and, putting things publicly. But actually, when you reframe that and you said it in such a quite, an honest but brutal way, it's like, you're absolutely right, because that's the shift that I needed to say, yeah, that those two paths of you just described there is the same thing. So it's going, well, one is I can help other people, or one is I just hide in my own fear, and then that doesn't help me or anybody else. So yeah.
I'm glad you got it. And I want to just share it quickly, because I want anyone that listens to this podcast to understand what I meant about selfish, because it does sound hard when I say it. Selfish for me is just this, right? And people may disagree with my concept, but I genuinely believe, whether you believe in God, the universe, or nothing at all, it doesn't matter, that we all have a purpose in life. And not everyone's purpose has to be this grand thing and they become some great composer like Beethoven or something, but there is some purpose. And I believe, and I challenge anyone to disagree with me, that 99.9% of people get to the end of their life without everything they could be having been mined from them. I challenge anyone to tell me otherwise in terms of what's possible for you to achieve or do or create or be versus what you actually do. Everyone falls short. Even the people that we think great, like Elon Musk, he's going to die having not fulfilled on his potential. It's just normal, right? So when I say selfish, what I mean is every time you hide or you listen to that voice in your head, you have these limiting beliefs about what you can and can't do, or I'm not going to post, or I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to marry that person I want to marry, I'm not going to tell that person I love him, or I'm not going to tell my mum or my dad that I love them, or I'm not going to go for this, or I'm not going to follow my own path, or do that career, or do that, or try that thing and be willing to fail. Every time you do that, it's an act of selfishness. Why? Easy way to describe this. If Beethoven had selfishly succumbed to his own desires to kill himself, years later, someone like me wouldn't have had Ode to Joy to listen to, and therefore wouldn't have given me the strength that I needed to be all I could be and not kill myself so I could pass it on. Never underestimate the difference you have on people around you and therefore the world. And every time you don't get present to your greatness, it's an act of selfishness. And that's what I mean when I coach people. And when I say it, it's so much passion that people get that I'm not saying it to be facetious or to upset them. I genuinely am so passionate that people bring out everything of them. I don't care. Because the fear that you have is not real. FEAR, false evidence appearing real. You've got evidence that somehow the fear is real. If I start a business and it fails, it's real what's going to happen. The repercussions, everyone's going to laugh at me. Or if I ask that person out and they say no, the repercussions are real. Nobody cares. What is real is you'll get to the end of your life and regret what you didn't do, not what you did. I have failed so many times in my life. I'm going to keep failing. Some people see me not even winning the Apprentice as a failure. I don't necessarily under the circumstances, but I get that other people do. I'm a very proud person. I don't like failing. I'm terrified of failing. But the difference with me is I don't let it stop me. I will go where angels fear to tread. I would rather live in my discomfort zone than my comfort zone. I would rather risk ridicule and laughter than risk regret, especially because I had such a gap in my life. Even though other people might think, Trey, you did well in that gap. You were so sick and you made Body Groove. Are you crazy? To me, it was a failure because I spent 18 years of my life thinking I'm just going to top myself, which means there's lots of opportunities I didn't take because I didn't think I'd be here in the future. Can you imagine that? I didn't think I'd get beyond my 30s. So what was the point of trying? So I had a lot of regrets. I mean, I probably will be a father at age 50. I probably will do a career that I love, like in TV and stuff, age 50. Why? Because there's been such a gap where half of me slightly gave up. I was just lucky that I'm from a culture that's so ambitious that giving up still looks like Body Groove and being on top of the pops and achieving a childhood dream, just because I'm from a culture where you will just do well regardless. Even if you're only given 20%, you'll probably achieve a lot with your 20% because that's just my cultural background. My dad did it and so was I. But I still didn't achieve all the things I wanted to do. I would rather have had 25 plaques on that wall. I mean, look, I've got like Stevie Wonder, I've got Prince, Elton John, Fleetwood Mac, all my heroes. They achieved way more musically than me. So I'm very aware that I haven't achieved all I could do. But I think it's also never too late. So selfishness is when you don't honor all of the gifts that you've been given, all of the purpose you've been given, all the talent you've been given. And instead what you do is choose to live a life that's small, where you put a lid in your self-expression, where you put a lid on your life. I want to rip that lid off people and say, shine. And you are going to fail and you will have regrets. But in you shining, even if you don't even get value for yourself, someone somewhere, maybe not even now, maybe in the future, like I had with Beethoven, is going to shine because you did to believe in yourself. And that's an act of selfishness when you don't follow your greatness.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you said that a lot better than me, but that is exactly it. And I think, and I'd shared that as some vulnerability for me, and to say that, that is your great skill as a coach and a mentor as well, to say that with compassion and, the passion that you have behind that to inspire me to do it. So thank you for that.
Thank
And I
you.
just want to wonder, what's one piece of advice that you would give to someone listening today that feels stuck or unsure about how to reach their goals that they've got? Maybe a piece of advice or a mantra that you live by. What would you say?
I'll give some advice, and I think my advice would be find a mentor. Because I'm not going to just say to people, read a book, because I think sometimes there are some things you can't do on your own. You just can't. I would say
Mm-hmm.
find a mentor, find a coach, find a good one, preferably someone that's gone through something that you've gone through and they've triumphed. Because I think, and I've said this to you before, and it's very controversial when I say it, I think 90% of the people who call themselves coaches have got no right to call themselves coaches. The people who've done a bit of NLP, read a couple of books, maybe Think and Grow Rich, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and one other, and then they suddenly think they've got what it takes to be a coach. Most of them haven't. So find yourself a really good coach who has the results that you covet for yourself, right? Because you can go so far alone, but you'll go much further with others, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I would want people to start to look at their environments, right? Because your environment will either make you or break you. And some people in very negative environments, sometimes it could be your own family, environments that don't really pull for your greatness. So if it's your family, then you want to do your best to educate them. And if you can't, then yeah, I don't advocate leaving your family, but just be okay with the fact that your mother or your dad or whoever it is might not share your dreams. By the way, my parents didn't share my dreams of music. They thought me and my brother were crazy making music, and they wanted to discourage us because if you're Nigerian, you've got to be a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer or a businessman. You've got no other choice, right? And they didn't believe in us until they saw our first paycheck for Body Group. Then suddenly they did, right? So look at your environment. Are people in your environment pulling for your greatness, or are they pulling you away from your greatness? What conversations are they having? Are they talking about people, or are they talking about things and about greatness and things they want to achieve? Because people are just gossiping about other people. You don't want to be around them. Talk to people who are trying to achieve something, trying to create something. So that's my advice. Get a mentor, get a coach, start to transform your environment. And then the third thing really is self-talk. It's the mindset. And if you've got a good coach, good mentor, they will start to instill this in you. Just start to notice and listen to what kind of conversations you're having in your head about yourself. Because we are nasty to ourselves. We say things to ourselves we wouldn't dare say even to a stranger. Like, look at you, you're useless, you're a failure. I'm a bloody good coach and mentor. I deal with that every day. I've got to do affirmations and God knows what to counteract that voice in my head, a voice that I call Amy. And I call her Amy because it's short for the amygdala, which I mentioned earlier. The amygdala is part of your limbic system that deals with fight or flight. So I call it Amy. That voice in your head, which I call Amy because it's separate from you, is nasty. So you want to start to train yourself to be like, I get you, Amy. I get what you say, that maybe I'm not good enough or I'm not going far enough. That's my persistent complaint. Trey, you're not doing enough. You're not achieving enough. Constantly, it's in my head. Say, I got it, Amy. I got your opinion. Thank you. And I say thank you because the amygdala is actually part of your survival mechanism. So I get it. Thank you. But your self-talk has to have kindness in it. You have to be present to who you authentically are, not who you complain about yourself or who, Amy kind of tries to convince you are, because she just wants you to stay safe, right? She doesn't want you to dream and take risks, right? But authentically, if you've got a good coach, you'll discover who you authentically are, the person that's capable of greatness. You now want to align your self-talk with this great version of yourself, not with this limiting belief version of yourself. You have to align it with, I am great, I am capable, whatever your affirmations are. Align your self-talk in your head with it, because then your actions will follow. Most people think it's have, do, be. Like, if I could just have a £1 million, then I could do this, and then I could be really proud of myself. But you've got to flip it. It's be, do, have. It's who are you being moment to moment? Are you being a victim or a victor? Are you coming from faith or fear? Who are you being? And that's what the self-talk is. Are you being someone who is in alignment with what you would then have to do in order to have the life that you covet for yourself or for your loved ones, whoever it might be? So it's that self-talk that starts to really permeate and allows you to be. It's ontological, right? It allows you to start to be this person, be this confident, be a leader, be resilient, be unstoppable is my favorite word. Be unstoppable. It's the being that comes from the self-talk that then allows you to do what you need to do and therefore have the results that you want for yourself. What I love about doing a podcast and things like this is I know there's someone that listens, like I do, religiously to podcasts, to things like this, and they develop power from it. And again, it's part of your arsenal you have, isn't it? I'm so glad that you're doing this because it provides someone with an arsenal of stories, essentially, of other people that have gone through suffering, so that they don't have to make the same mistakes. And I think that's the beauty of listening to someone else. And someone might listen to my story and think, God, it's awful what Tre went through, but I'm glad I did, because whoever it is doesn't have to go through the same thing. And I didn't have that when I went through what I went through.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think, it has been so inspirational getting to know you, and you, true to form, have given so much value in that when I kind of set this up saying it was just a short podcast. So, the listeners, I'm sure, will get so much up from this. And what we'll do is I'll share your links to Sobo Club and to your Instagram. And is there anything else that you want people to be directed to in that?
Yeah, just in my Instagram. Obviously, I'm on LinkedIn, Tre Lowe, soboclub.com. And anyone that's dealing with anything that has come up in this podcast that they might be dealing with, feel free to reach out to me. I'm not one of these people that won't respond. I mean, sometimes stuff gets hidden, so I might respond a lot later. But you might be dealing, I don't know, with derealization, or maybe even tinnitus or whatever. Or you might even want a coach or a mentor. I don't coach and mentor one-to-one that much anymore. It's quite rare that I do it, and I'm not that cheap, for a lot of people may not be able to afford it. But I think people should be willing to invest, to be honest. I've spent tens of thousands of pounds on self-development, and I would have given everything for that, because it's just priceless. So yeah, if there's anyone that's maybe thinking of a mentor or coach and want to have a conversation with me, by all means, reach out. I might do a session or two with you, which I think is enough. If you're seeing coaches forever on end, I think that's the wrong thing. You shouldn't be. A good coach you should see no more than 8 times. That should be enough to get you on your journey. But yeah, definitely, by all means, reach out to me.
Amazing. And thank you once again, Tre. Really insightful.
Thank you all.
If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to rate the show or leave a comment. It really helps us reach more people. And don't forget to share it with anyone else who could use a little motivation today. Have a fantastic day, and make sure you hit your targets.